Hey everyone, welcome back to our next career readiness episode. We have Keira with us today, who is going to talk to us about accepting or rejecting the job offer, as well as negotiating salary. We are so excited to have her here today. So Keira, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and we'll let you take it from there.
All right, great. Hi, Amber. Hi, Jessica. Hi, career readiness class who's watching this at some point. My name is Keira Solon. I am currently an assistant professor in the business school here. So some of you may have had me in class or might have me in class. My primary content areas are business communication and events management. Before moving into the business school and teaching full time, I actually have a background in career services. I worked in the UCM career services office for 6 or 7 years. I actually worked with Amber and was not fortunate enough to work with Jessica, but have worked with her since. And before that, I worked in career services at Oklahoma State University and academic advising at Oklahoma State University. That's actually where I did my master's degree in technical and professional communication. Another just sort of fun or interesting fact about my background, in addition to being a full-time instructor right now in the business school, I also am an etiquette trainer and I am a speaker. So I travel to a lot of different places in kind of in the Midwestern region. And I talk to people at schools or professional organizations about salary negotiation, professional etiquette, and et cetera. So that's who I am.
Awesome. Thank you, Keira.
Busy lady.
Yes.
Super busy lady. Okay, so like Amber said, we are focusing on accepting, rejecting jobs, salary negotiation, but also kind of what the first 90 days of employment look like for a new professional. So the first question that we have for you is, what would you say is your 3 top tips, like those top 3 tips that you can give on accepting and rejecting a job?
Okay. Well, accepting and rejecting, I think there's one principle for sure that's universal, but then it kind of diverges. So I think I'll talk about what you should do either way, and then a little bit of information about each one of those things, if that's okay.
Perfect.
When it comes time to get the job offer, whether or not you are going to be accepting or rejecting the job offer, the main thing that I would recommend to people is to take a minute and think about it. As you guys know, and as some of your listeners might be able to identify with, the job search can be a really tough, exhausting, strenuous, emotional process. It's full of highs and lows. It's really rigorous. You do a lot of application. You do a lot of hoping and dreaming. You are a lot of disappointment, right? And so when we finally get that job offer, and somebody calls us and says, hey, after all your hard work, we actually want you, right? We want to hire you, want to be in our organization. It can be a really natural tendency to be like, yes, great. Okay, when do I start? Because it's this emotional high and it's this sort of relief of information. Even if somebody calls you and makes you like the best job offer in the entire world and you can't believe they're offering you that much money, right? You still should take some time to think about it. You want to get to the point where you are not in that really heightened emotional state, because this is a huge, huge, huge decision with lots and lots of implications for yourself, your family, your career. And so you want to be able to get to an emotional state where you can be clear-headed, right? So that's the first thing I recommend, is when you get a job offer, whether you ultimately choose it to accept it or you choose to reject it, the first thing that you need to do is you need to ask for some time to think about it. And you can do that with all the enthusiasm in the world. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for calling me. This is really amazing. This is also a really big deal. So I'm going to need some time to think about it. And then here's a key that we're going to get back to later on, hopefully when we talk about negotiation. Ask how long you have to consider the offer. When do you need to know? And remind me to come back to that if I don't, because that's going to be helpful in the negotiation process. Okay.
Got it.
So that's the first thing I recommend, regardless of whether you're going to accept or reject, take some time to think about it. And this is important if the offer you get comes back feeling like a little bit low or feeling like something that you might want to reject. If it feels, just because it feels a little maybe slightly disappointing when they first offer it to you, you want that time to really think about it, to think about the whole package, to think about your implications for your career and et cetera. Okay, so that's the first thing. Take some time to think. So let's say you have taken some time to think about it. They said, sure, just let us know by Monday. And so you and your family and your friends talk about it all weekend. You can't wait. You're so excited, right? And it's time to accept it. Accepting a job is actually easier than rejecting a job. I mean, as far as the advice I would give people, the main thing that I would recommend is to try to accept in writing. Even if you are supposed to call somebody back and give them your acceptance, you certainly can. But then I would ask for an email address and say, I'd just like to send you a confirmation email. Because one of the things that you want to try to do when you're accepting a job is you want to recap your understanding of what it is they're offering you. You want to recap somewhere, thank you. So like in the email, thank you so much for offering me XY position at XYZ company. I'm excited to start on blank day, whatever day you guys had agreed that your starting date would be. And then there needs to be a line in there that says something like, my understanding is my salary will be XYZ, or my hourly pay will be XYZ, probably just XY if it's hourly. And then, and I will have full health and dental benefits or whatever. So you really want to take that package that they offered you and look at that package and then try to recap your basic understanding of that package. It's just an additional way to make sure that all of your bases are covered and to make sure that you heard things appropriately. Like I said, there's a lot of emotion that goes into being offered a job. So you can call and accept if you're supposed to call and accept, but I recommend always trying to follow up with an email outlining your understanding of the conversation. And that way, if they're like, oh, you thought we said 52, we actually said 22, right? Then you can figure that out before your first paycheck. So
that's really good advice.
Yeah. I think it's just an additional way to protect yourself. I don't want to at all suggest that organizations are, trying to do you wrong or anything. But again, that when we are dealing with this much emotion and we're dealing with this much process, which is what the job search is, it's a good idea when you're at the end of the process to say, here's my understanding of how this resolves itself. So that's my advice for accepting a job. If you are going to be rejecting a job, first of all, I want to say it's okay to reject a job. Like it is really, really okay to reject a job. I think a lot of people, and I know I find myself falling into this professional trap in general. It's like, oh, I just want to help people and I just want to do the right thing and they liked me, so I should like them back, right? Sometimes it's not the right offer. Sometimes it's not the right fit. Sometimes you got a different offer. Sometimes the terms are unagreeable. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why people accept a job, or reject a job. It doesn't have to be personal. Okay. So if you have taken some time to thought about it and you came at that heightened emotional state and you really considered the full package, maybe the salary is a little bit low, but the benefits also suck too. And you have to move to Tucson and whatever, you just can't make it work. And you've decided to reject the job. The first thing that I would recommend is do it as soon as you decide. And so there's kind of that fine balance there. I would recommend thinking about it long enough that you feel sure and that decision has resonated in your soul, right? And it's what you're going to do. But once you make that decision, you need to let the organization know ASAP because they need to move forward with their process. I mean, realistically, whenever there's a job open, there's an actual hole in an organization that needs to be filled. Right. There's stuff that needs to be done and expertise that needs to be acquired. So you need to let that organization know so they can get over the disappointment of losing someone as awesome as you, right? And regroup and figure out what their search is going to look like from there. Unlike the accepting a job offer, I recommend declining a job offer verbally. So written, if you're accepting it, you want to have it written down verbally. You want to try to have that conversation. And that's really more just out of deference and respect for the employer. Also less of a chance that your words could be misconstrued. You have the appropriate opportunity to relay a friendly tone when you're rejecting a job offer. So I recommend trying to do it verbally. If you're going to reject a job, it's always a good idea to state a reason. And that doesn't mean to give your entire life story or well, you guys only offer me this much money and somebody else offered me this much money. You know, you don't have to give all the details, but thank you so much for the offer. It was really a wonderful process to be involved with. I enjoyed learning so much about your company. Unfortunately, I've taken some time over the weekend to think about it, and the relocation is just not something I can manage right now. Yeah. I look forward to keeping in touch about future opportunities.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Try to do it. You can't, I mean, sometimes the only way we talk to recruiters or we talk to hiring managers is through email. So you might have to do it in a written format, but if at all possible, try to do it voice to voice, just out of respect.
Yeah, I think that's
great. Keira, what do you think about, you know, sometimes students find themselves in situations where, whether it's internships or full-time jobs, where they may accept and then something else comes along after they've accepted and then they want to go back and not accept? What are some thoughts you have around, should students do that, not do that? How do you feel once you've accepted that position or internship? Should they move forward or can they renege? Like, what are some thoughts around that?
I have a lot of thoughts around that, and they're complicated and they're kind of conflicting. Yeah. So my moral and ethical beacon says when you've accepted something, and you need to go forward with that. I think that's an easier thing to tell people when it comes to internships, however, than it is full-time jobs. Because an internship has a defined start date and finish date. And hey, you know what? If you said yes to this company this time, but this other company still wants you, they're probably going to want you again when their next internship cycle comes, or when it's time to hire for full-time jobs. So I would say, generally speaking, if we were going to just be really simplistic, you need to stick with what you have accepted. However, I will also say that we also have to look out for ourselves, right? So if what you accepted was some sort of an unpaid internship because you really want to get your foot in the door and you really want to get that experience, but then you got an offer for a paid internship with an organization that's just as good that could potentially turn into full-time hire, then you're dealing with a different level of negotiation. Or a different level of consideration, I guess I would say. The negotiation's already been done. The things that I would encourage people to think about instead of just making it a black and white issue is, number one, the grass isn't always greener. Just because you got an offer where maybe, so you accepted your offer, then you got another offer, it's like, oh, it pays more.
Yeah.
Well, just because it pays more doesn't mean it's going to be a better opportunity for you. Just because it pays more doesn't mean that the responsibilities are going to suit you as well. Just because it pays more, you know, so that's one thing. If you were excited enough about something to accept it and you've invested yourself in it, just because it feels good that now somebody else wants you, doesn't necessarily mean that something else is going to end up being a better opportunity. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing that I would say is, if you do retract, so let's just say you just have to do it. The second opportunity is just like completely amazing, and there's no way you could ever say no and whatever, right? You're gonna be rich and famous once you get started. If you retract or reject a job offer, that bridge is burned.
Yeah.
That's a company or an organization that you'll probably never have the opportunity to work for again. That's somebody that you might be embarrassed to see at a professional conference. That's when your company and their company are competing for different things. There's going to be some, I don't want to make it sound like they're going to, like, you know, have your face on a bulletin board and be throwing darts at it necessarily, right? Like, but it is professional suicide to that organization.
Yeah.
And you do remember, I mean, I think about myself as a hiring manager. I remember situations like that from people that either applied and no-showed, or I had a negative experience with. So yeah, you know, those are things that stick out and you remember.
And I think that comes back to that very first point that we were talking about. Really take some time to think about it. And I probably said it so much that it's kind of ad nauseum at this point, but don't let it be knee-jerk. Don't let your acceptance or rejection of a job just be your instinct and then just blurt it out and then you have to move on. You know, the idea would be that if you really took some time to think about your first offer and you considered it and you worked yourself up to a place of acceptance and excitement about it, that you would be able to hold on to that even if additional offers came through. So I would say, in general, don't do it. If you find yourself in a situation where you are going to do it, understand that there's be smart about it.
Yeah. Well, and you never know what companies are going to talk to each other. Like people have friends. I mean, higher ed is definitely one of those that
absolutely,
if someone were to burn us, we'd be like, oh, you know, if someone asked us about that person, we'd be like, well, you know, they accepted and then, you know, went back, you know, so always be careful.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Very good advice. So Keira, around negotiation, how do you even prepare or start to think about how to have a negotiation conversation? Like, how does that even, how do you do that and get started with that?
Well, I would recommend starting it at the time that you start your job search. And that way it's just a part of your job search process and you're armed with some information.
Okay.
So, but I also know that when you are looking to graduate college, you're looking for your first opportunity in the field. Sometimes you're applying for so many types of positions and so many, you're just sort of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what, you know, what hits. You're not necessarily going to fully and extensively research the salary on each one of those positions. So when you know that it's time, right, and you're getting ready to enter this full-on job search, the thing that you need to do in preparation is you need to have 3 numbers prepared. And a lot of this information I'm going to give comes from a book called How to Make $1 Million in a Minute or something like that. It's by Jack Chapman. So it's not all just me being brilliant, but it's Jack Chapman being brilliant through me. But you need to have 3 different numbers prepared. And those are called your ISN numbers. And so you have your I number, which is your ideal number. And this is if everybody paid me based on my true and absolute amazingness, right, and my real contribution to the world, this is the number I would make, which still needs to be realistic, but it can be like, that's your ideal number, right? It's ideal. That's what the perfect opportunity would look like for me.
Okay.
The second number that you need to come up with is your S number, your satisfactory number. And this is the number that it's like, yeah, this is probably what I will make. And I'm going to tell you guys how to like find these numbers too, right? But the third number, and this is the number that people so often forget to think about before they go into salary negotiation, is your N number, and that's your no-go number. And this is the number that no matter how awesome the company is, and no matter the fact that I can take my dog to work and my desk comes with free chocolate or whatever, right? I can't live on this no-go number, right? Yeah. So you need your 3 numbers, your I, your S, and your N. The way that we find these numbers is by doing tons and tons of research. You go to different job postings. You can go to websites like Glassdoor. Sometimes you can find this information on LinkedIn. You can reach out to people if you have like people that graduated a year or 2 before you that are in your social network. You can reach out to them, ask their salaries. If it's public employment, like if you're working for a university or a state or federal agency, you can probably just Google it to find out. But you need to research until you get a realistic view. Some of the things that you need to think about when you're doing your research is pay attention to geography, like where you're located in the country, and to your level of experience. So I know in my business communication classes, I have students do some salary negotiation research, and they'll turn in their assignment, right? And it'll say something like, oh, I want to be a marketing coordinator in Kansas City, and I expect my average starting salary to be $120,000 a year, because that's what Glassdoor said that marketing executives make in Kansas City. Okay, well, we have some things we need to kind of unpack here, right? Because marketing executives is not a marketing coordinator.
Yeah.
That's very, very different levels of experience that are there. And typically when you're looking at numbers on the internet, Glassdoor, wherever you're at, they're giving you an aggregate number, Bureau of Labor Statistics, right? So this is all the people that are in the field who have between 0 days experience and 25 years of experience, right? And so we're working with this average number. And so don't think necessarily that just because it's an average, that's what a starting salary averages into. So you need to think a little bit more critically about it. There's a really good website, I'm sure you guys have recommended students there, called bestplaces.net, where you can go in and you can find out, okay, I know in Warrensburg, I can live comfortably at $40,000 a year. So I'm now going to move to Miami. what does $40,000 in Warrensburg need to be in Miami to have the same level of living? So those are the types of comparisons you need to do. The other things that you need to consider, in addition to knowing what your ideal, your satisfactory, and your no-go numbers are, is you really need to think about your individual value and the risk factors that are associated. So individual value is a number that can adjust that average number. And unfortunately, for newly graduating college students, even ones with tons and tons of experience, their individual value actually detracts from that average number, because their individual value, part of what their individual value system is built on, is a lack of professional experience. And so you would expect to make a little bit less. But let's say you're searching for a marketing coordinator role and you've been a marketing coordinator for 20 years and you have had really successful marketing campaigns and you've had these amazing accomplishments, and your individual value is a little bit higher. And so individual value is what it's called. It's not like your value as a human being, right? But this is what you can immediately contribute to the organization. And then the other thing that you kind of need to factor into this money is risk factor dollars. And risk factor dollars are the risk that you incur when you accept a new job. So for example, NFL players, just an example, right? I don't know if anybody's applying in this class to be an NFL player, but if you were going to do that, you can expect that your career is not going to last very long. Unless you're amazing, right? So it's going to be an intense career. It's going to be a short career because your body's going to eventually break. And so you need to make a whole bunch of money, because you may only be in there for 5 to 7 years or 3 years. I don't know how long it lasts, not forever, right? I know by the time they're our age, they're way too old to be doing it, unless they're quarterbacks we won't mention. So that is something to think about when you think about more realistically outside of the NFL realm, what risk factor dollars look like. I think about my husband, for example. My husband is, he has salary plus commission, and his salary is adequate, but most of his paycheck comes from commission. And so with the type of work he did in the last couple months or last couple of years, his work was really hit by pandemic related stuff, which I think a lot of, organizations were. But when he negotiated his original salary, he negotiated to a level that even if he didn't get paid his commission, we could still live. Right? Maybe couldn't order Amazon every single day, right? But we could still live on the salary that he made. And so when you go into those commission-based jobs, then you're bringing an additional level of risk factor, because things could go good or things could go bad, but either way, you want to make sure that things go. And so sometimes you build that into your base salary. If you're planning on relocating, and again, maybe you're going to, I don't know, I'm renting out of exotic places, Billings, Montana, right? And you have no family up there and flights are really expensive, and you know that you're going to take this huge leap of faith. You may kind of consider that when it comes to your salary, because as that risk factor, you have to add that number into what it is you're thinking. So anyway, I'm just talking a lot. You need to come up with some numbers and you need to consider everything. Ideal, satisfactory, no-go. The important thing about salary, two important things about salary negotiation is, one, it matters where in the process you are, but know that whatever number gets said first is a number that's called an anchor. And that's the number by which all other numbers are going to be judged by. So if you are the first one that says a number, they force you into it, if they trap you into it, you're in the corner and you can't get out of it, it's better to be high than to be low. Not ridiculously high, where you're foolish and they don't want to talk to you anymore because your common sense is off, right? But that's the number that starts things, is the anchor number. So a story about salary negotiation that I think is really interesting. So I know a professional, she's actually a physical therapist, and she was moving from a physical therapy job into a hospital administrator position. And she called me for help with the salary negotiation because there were a couple of things that she wanted. So the salary was fine-ish. She was going from hourly to salary. And so she wanted some clarification there. but she also wanted an office because there was no private office for this position in that particular hospital at that time. It was a brand new position. It was like an ergonomic specialist. And so she wanted a private office, and she wanted tuition reimbursement or school loan reimbursement, because as a physical therapist, they were helping her pay her school loans. These administrative positions, they weren't, or at least not to the same level.
Wow.
And so I just remember having this conversation with her, and she's like, okay, here's my plan. I'm going to ask for the office first. And then when they give me the office, then I'm going to ask for the tuition stuff. And I was like, no, you're not. That's a terrible idea, right? When you are engaged in a salary negotiation, you need to think of everything you need.
Yep.
Whether that's a higher monetary value, whether that's more vacation days, whether that's starting a week later than they want you to, a private office, car to drive, whatever, right? You need to ask for all of those things when you go through the negotiation process, so they can like pick and choose, because you're not going to get, you might, typically you're not going to get everything you want, but if you ask for something and they're like, sure, and then you ask for something else, then you appear very high maintenance and also ungrateful. Yeah. And that's not the right way to start the process.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Such great advice.
I could talk about this all day. I feel like there's so many important things that I didn't say.
Yes.
But it's important and it's complicated, but do your research, and that's where it starts.
Yep. So with that said, Keira, please give us a proper example of how you would negotiate salary.
Okay. Well,
not to put you on the spot.
That's fun. Okay. So this all depends on where you are in the process. So I guess I will put that back at you. So if you are in the first interview and they ask you a salary question in the first interview, so let's say you're going through the screening interview, you're with HR, whatever, and they say, you know, what would you expect your salary to be? You know, the prevailing wisdom is that we try to wiggle out of those questions and say, well, right now I'm just interested in learning more about your organization. And I trust that, you know, once we both agree that I'm the right fit, that we'll be able to find a mutually agreed upon number. You can try that.
You can try that. Yeah.
You try it. Mm-hmm. Doesn't usually work, right? That's so you can try it, but very often people will be like, okay, well, that was a nice speech, but now I'm ready to hear your number. So in the first interview, your answer after you try something like that, because do try it. Because again, these anchor numbers, we don't want to drop them too soon, right? But if they push you and they're like, okay, well, could you give us an idea of what you're thinking? In the first interview, you want to give a range. And that range should be somewhere between just under your satisfactory number to probably just under your ideal number. And the broader you can make that range, the better you're doing at that point, right? So, well, according to my research, the average starting salary for this type of position and this type of a area of the country is going to be between $35,000 and $52,000. At a first interview, that'll probably be enough to suffice, right? They're really just checking to make sure that you know what you're getting into, that everybody's expectations are in line, okay? So if you are in the second interview, or what you perceive to be a final interview, you've gone through the process, you know that they're serious about you as a candidate, you're beginning to get serious about them as an organization, and they say, can you give us an idea of your salary requirements? At that point, you need to be prepared to give a number, and or at least a much smaller range.
Yeah.
And this needs to be closing in on the number that you actually think that you're going to walk away with. And so this is where you would say, well, I've done my research, and based on this type of position and this type of an organization and a candidate with my experience, right? Because remember, I also speak like 9 languages, or, you know, whatever it is you're bringing to the table. They know these things about you by now. I don't speak 9 languages for the viewers out there. This is where you say, I would, you know, according to these factors, my expected salary range would be somewhere around $48,000 a year, for example. And you don't have to be exact, $48,612, you know, it's around this area. Yeah. But again, don't lowball yourself. Yeah. Don't go ridiculously high just to see if it'll work, because again, some of this is still an employer feeling out judgment, an employer feeling out your understanding of the industry. but don't lowball yourself either, because now that $48,000, that kind of becomes the number that we work from. Okay. And if a company was actually really going to pay you 70, they're probably not just going to go ahead and pay you 48 and pay everybody 70, right? They may be like, well, what about 55? You're like, that's amazing. And then you can figure that out when you get in there, but you need to be at that process prepared with a number. The best time to have a salary negotiation conversation, the time when you're actually going to have the most leverage and the most opportunity to affect the salary conversation, is going to be if you can wait, or if they choose to wait until they've made you the job offer. And that's a really critical time to try to get to, because once they've decided they want you, they've decided they want you. And at that point, when somebody, and you guys know this, you've been involved with hiring committees, and you've seen it, when you've found this person that's this amazing fit and can bring these amazing skills to your organization, at that point, you're willing to, go to bat. You're willing to move heaven and earth, and not in a way that would be unfair to your current employees who you also value, but you want to get somebody. And so if they've made that decision, they've made the offer. And remember, when they've decided to hire you, they've also decided not to hire the other awesome people that came along. That's a point where you can really negotiate your salary. So that would sound something like, hey, Keira, you're amazing. We're going to hire you. And then I say, oh, let me think about it. So then I'm going to call them back and be like, hey, I thought about it. It's really somewhere I'd like to work. My question is the salary negotiable? And if they say no, the salary is not negotiable. In some places, the salary just isn't negotiable, right? And then you can make a choice at that point, and you can say, I'm going to need a little bit more time, or you can say whatever. But in private industry and nonprofit, very often they will say, well, what were you thinking? Okay. And so this is where you can say, well, I know that you offered me X number of dollars a year. However, I've been thinking it over the weekend, and considering I am bringing in these things with me, and I am going to be looking to relocate across the state in order for this position, I was wondering if we could meet at a salary range that's at X. Or you could say, as you know, through our conversations, I'm also interviewing at several other organizations. If you could make my salary X right now, I could accept this offer today. And it may not be salary. They may not be able to budge on the salary, but they may be able to give you relocation expenses. They may be able to negotiate your start date with you. They may be able to offer you some sort of employee incentive. I know one thing that's really hot right now is working from home, right?
Remote.
My husband and I talk about that a lot. He's been with his company for 17 years. He was in office every single day until the pandemic. Now he's been home for 16 months, and they did a return to office. And then 3 weeks later, they said, no, actually just stay home till we tell you to come back to the office. And, he's not job searching. I don't want to put that energy out there, but we've talked about, if he was going to switch jobs, how much of a pay cut would we be willing to take for him to be able to work from home? Because he's not commuting every day. He's there to help with the kids. My schedule gets to be more flexible. I can work more. So, those may be some of the things that right now, I think that before, 2 years ago, we were sort of starting to see the work from home picture, but maybe they can't pay you anymore, but maybe you can work from home on Fridays or Tuesdays or whatever. So the point is, if you can wait until they are sure they want to hire you, then you're going to have the most leverage. But depending on, you can't always wait to that point, depending on how they drive the process. And so the conversation should actually sound pretty different, whether it's first interview, second interview, or at the hire.
I love those, varying levels of examples, because it's so critical depending where you are in the process. So I really appreciate.
And I would say
highlighting
practice.
That. It's
practice.
hard.
Even if that may sound dumb, but like set down your significant other, your roommate, or your cat, or whatever, like practice it, because it's intense. Even if you deserve it, right? You got to say these things out loud, because you got to.
Your cat won't say no.
Your cat won't say no. Your cat might say no. Your dog won't say no. Right? Cat's like, I don't even have time for this. I'm gonna take a nap. Right.
Dog's like, yes. Oh, that's
Okay.
funny.
Oh, that is funny. Okay, so we're going to shift a little bit to kind of like you've gotten the job, you're employed. Now it's the first 90 days. What advice would you give to a new professional to think about, especially in that first 90 days of employment?
Oh my goodness, there's so much. So much. Pay attention to the little things. Really be observant of what's going on around you and do the best that you can to pay attention to and absorb the culture. A story that a colleague of mine or a friend of mine told, she's a teacher in like K-12 at an elementary school. And she was talking about how when she was a new teacher, she was like really, really eager, right? Yeah. And so she would show up at the school early before anybody else got there, and she'd like park in the first row and like go into the building. And she realized, or someone told her, I'm not sure how this actually happened, but that first row of parking lots was for like the older teachers that, you know, were less physically able or more seniority. I don't know what we mean by older, right? And there would be that wasn't in the orientation, right? That wasn't in the hiring packet, but those are the types of things like, and that's not to say that you're not going to make some of these mistakes, but try to really pay attention to what's going on around you and the patterns that you're seeing, because organizations have all sorts of informal cultures that have been developed. And the only way to tap into those is to look for them.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I would say, pay attention to the little things, ask a ton of questions, but also maybe ask your boss or your supervisor, who's ever responsible for training you, how they would like the questions to be asked.
Yeah.
So do they want you to just interject at the staff meeting every single time something doesn't make sense to you? Do they want you to just pay attention and write down your questions and send them in an email afterwards? Mm-hmm. Do they want you to schedule meetings with them? Mm-hmm. Do they prefer to never have to meet with you at all? Like it's okay to ask these things. Like, you know I'm going to have a lot of questions as we get started. What's the best way for me to approach you with questions? Mm-hmm. People can give you that answer, right? Ask a lot of questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, but find out the right way to ask questions. Stay humble. And usually by like day 4 or 5, that's going to happen to you anyway. But again, there's a lot of emotions going into starting a new job, and you feel awesome, and somebody wants you, maybe several people wanted you, and you're able to negotiate your way up, and you are clearly the expert at this expert thing that they hired you to do, right? But then you go into the organization, and there's going to be a lot of people who know a lot, who know it because they've lived it, who know it because they've had other experiences, because they had different education that prepared them. And so while you certainly want to be confident in your abilities, you also want to be prepared to learn from the people around you.
Yeah.
So show humility, show humbleness, and go in with an open mind. Again, be confident that you know what you need to know and that they selected you from probably a large number of people who also wanted this opportunity, but now you're there not only to contribute, but to learn.
Yeah.
And then something else, there's 2 other things that I think are really important. Show initiative when you can. It's really easy when we start a new job to feel like the new guy and nobody knows me and I don't know what I'm doing and I don't understand what all these like initials and acronyms are, and but pay attention for opportunities to have exceptional contribution. I think about when I was thinking about my own career since I've been over here in the management department. When I first came into this role full time, I was fortunate because I'd been at the university for 7 years. I knew a lot of people. I wasn't brand new to anything, but I was brand new to being in this type of role. And I would sit in these meetings. And I'd be like, I wonder what they're talking about. Like, I bet I should contribute, but I have no idea what's happening. SLOs and assessment are, right? But I do remember early on in my time here, they were talking about this events marketing and management program. And they had just started talking about it, and the program was just coming together, and they were going to have these event management classes. And I remember saying at a point where I was new enough that nobody probably knew whether or not to believe me, right? Like, oh, if we develop these event management classes, I have some good events experience, having worked in career services, hosting career fairs and that type of stuff. Yeah. If we need somebody to teach them, then, you know, I would like to maybe teach them if you guys need me to, right? So fast forward 5 years, not only do I teach the classes, but I designed the courses. We completely created everything from the ground up. I'm the main point of contact for that program. I'm training to be the program coordinator. I do all the recruiting. Like that probably would have never happened if I hadn't have taken the initiative and said, this is something I think I could be good at.
Yeah.
If the time comes, you know, and I had a receptive boss who was like, yeah, do that. And now it's, as you guys know, it's probably the biggest and most noteworthy part of my career. So take initiative. When you see opportunities and you think that you could be good at something, or there's a unique way for you to contribute, just make it be known. And if it's not the right time, if there's somebody else to do it, if you get passed by, you still made it known that you're willing to contribute in a way that maybe they didn't have in mind when they hired you.
Yeah.
Okay. And then here's my last piece of advice in that first 90 days. Stay in touch with your old colleagues. You get really, you guys know what it's like to leave a job and you love those people so much. And how could you ever love another group of people as much as you love those people? And you did so amazing together. And then you go into your new job and guess what? You love those people too, right?
Yeah.
And now you're busy and you're doing a different kind of work and you're learning the system and you're getting everything figured out. It's really easy, even with the best of intentions, to lose touch with the people from your old job who meant so much to you. Or even if you don't lose touch altogether, to not have meaningful contact, right? You just follow each other on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. I'm old enough now in my career that I have come to realize that the most valuable thing you can get out of a career or any position is a professional network.
Yep.
And a personal network, right, of support. You need to stay in touch with those people because they, one, are probably important people in your life and you had real and meaningful connection, but two, that's a part of your professional network. And you may never want to go back to that organization. That organization may never be the right fit for you again. But as you move forward in your career, you're going to be in a place where you're helping people and you're mentoring people and you're giving people the same gifts and opportunities that you've been given in your career. And you want to have that network you can reach back on in order to help empower the people around you. When I left Oklahoma State University, I've been at UCM now for 12 years. My boss actually left a year before I did. So 13 years ago, my main boss when I was there, obviously I had a different boss for last year, who's also great, but she is someone I've stayed in touch with this entire time. And actually I saw her for the first time in 13 years this summer. We both happened to be in Las Vegas at the same time with our husbands, and we made it a point to get together. And it was amazing, not only because she had been a phenomenal mentor to me, but just to remember how special that time was. And I have sent students her way in the past. She works in a completely different part of the university now. She works in a completely different part of the country. I don't want to move to Indiana, right? But I've worked with students who do, and I say, hey, I have a support system for you there. So stay in touch with your old colleagues in that first 90 days, put it on your calendar, go have tacos with Tina or whatever, right? You need to do these things because these people are important both personally and professionally.
I like that, being intentional about it, because you're right. In those first 90 days, life is chaotic. It's easy to be like, just forget about it. But if you can be intentional and get it on the calendar, then that's great. That's really good advice. I love that.
Yeah, I love that too. I mean, just like Chelsea was texting us the other day and, hey, do you have any contacts at UMKC? And I've kept in touch with a lot of the people I did my master's with and who I met with my graduate assistantship that have now moved to other universities in the state. So now I have connections there. And I was like, oh yeah, I've got someone. And he knew someone that actually worked in the department that she wanted to apply to. So I got an email for her. And so it just, you never know how it can benefit you, or like you said, the other people in your life that you care about and you can best support and mentor. So
and that feeling you have when you're leaving a job that these people are amazing, like that's real. And those people probably were amazing. You know, I even think about personally my relationship with your guys' office. And you know, I worked in the career services office there for 6 years, and Amber remembers because she was there. She was my boss. Like when I left, I knew it was the right thing for me professionally because I wanted to be in the classroom, but it was gut wrenching. It was soul crushing. I was so sad because I loved that work and those colleagues so much. And part of it's being here on this campus, it's made it easy. We've stayed in touch.
Yeah.
And I do things for you guys and you guys do things for me. And it's really, I feel like, me particularly because as an individual, but I've been able to gain a lot of power and help through those relationships. And I hope that I've helped you guys, you know, similarly. It's important. Those relationships are important. And that feeling of these people are amazing and I need them in my life is a real thing. And so try to hold on to it to the best that you can.
Yeah. I even remember when I first started, because I took Keira's spot. So I was thinking Keira. So I had big shoes to fill, but you were so nice and like, hey, let's get lunch. And you like mentored me through that and was like, reach out if you need anything. And that, I remember feeling like, wow, that was really nice. Like she didn't have to do that, you know? So,
it's
yeah,
important. And I think people should try to build it into their value system, you know, honor your relationships.
Final question. Share with us a story about any of these 3 topics that maybe has happened to you in your own professional life.
Can I tell you about my first performance review?
Sure.
So when it wasn't not my first professional position ever. I worked in industry before coming into higher education very briefly. But when I came into higher education, my first job was an academic advisor and at Oklahoma State University. And I had a 90-day performance review. And that was going to be another piece of advice, but I felt like I was giving too much advice. Within that first 90 days, ask to sit down with your boss, your supervisor, and find out how you're doing, right? I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to ask because it was already built in. And quite frankly, I wouldn't have known to ask to do that. Right. So I had a 90-day performance review and I felt like I was just crushing this job, right? Like I was like, doing like crazy wizardry with student schedules and I was building connections all over the university and I knew that I was really helping people and I was getting along well with my colleagues. And if I didn't know the answer, I was asking and I was constantly popping my head in to get all the information. And I don't remember much about that performance review, like how I scored and all of the areas. I don't even remember if it was a formal scoring system, but it was a sit down and talk about it. I assume that things must have went like, okay, right. But the one thing that I really remember about that performance review is my boss at that time, her name was Keely, telling me that an area of improvement for me was to become an information seeker. That I was asked that the job of an academic advisor, you have to know so much. You have to know everything about everything on the entire campus. Go hug your advisor today if you haven't done that, right? Because it's like academic advising is intense and it's involved. And she said, you know, you're going to have to figure things out for yourself. You have a university directory, you have a course catalog, you have a website, although it was like 2006 and the web was a little more cumbersome than it is now. But she's like, you need to start seeking information. And so I thought I was doing the right thing by like checking with people because I didn't want to give people bad advice. But really, I had been there long enough. At some point, there was this magical switch that had went off that I didn't know about that I needed to become self-seeking. Yeah. And I needed to find that information myself. And I wouldn't have known that had I not had that performance review. And I wouldn't have even known that that was something about myself that needed to be worked on. You guys know me professionally now, and I've told this story to other people professionally too. And it's kind of surprising because now I'm like an expert information seeker, like, oh, you need to know something, I'll find out, I'll get back to you, right? Like immediately. But that's a skill that had to be cultivated. And so I think when you think about starting a new job and moving into a new position, there's so many things you can do to prepare yourself, but there's also going to be things that you're just unprepared for. Mm-hmm. Like if you think about when you started college, you're like, oh, I'm going to get this degree and I'm going to make these friends, but you end up through college having these experiences that you never expected having that shape who you become as a person. Mm-hmm. New jobs are like that too. Yep. You think you know what you're getting into, but you don't. It's not just a job. It's not just a career. It's a life experience. And you're going to grow and be pushed in ways that you didn't know you were capable of, in ways that you didn't know that you needed to. And that's okay. It's okay. I remember feeling embarrassed when she told me that I needed to, and she was very nice about it, but it still was embarrassing, right? That I needed to get better at seeking information. But like I said, it's made me an information seeker, and I now value that quality and teach that quality to other people. So prepare the best that you can, but prepare to be unprepared for some things as well. That's my story.
Well said. Well said.
This is fun. What else you want to know?
So good.
Can I come back?
Yes, of course. That was great advice. Really great advice.
Well, I wish everybody who's listening to this podcast luck. As I mentioned, I am in the business school. You can find me on the website. My last name is Solon, Solon. I'm happy to help anybody. I think that the resources and the expertise provided in career services are phenomenal. And more often than not, that's where I'd point somebody. But if there's any of these things that anybody wants to talk about a little bit more in depth or more specifically, I would encourage them to reach out because I'm right here on campus and this is my jam, right? I love to talk about this kind of stuff. So I'd be happy to continue the conversation personally as well.
Well, Keira, we really appreciate all of your insights. I mean, you're so knowledgeable, so spot on with everything that you talked about today. So students, listen, Keira is great and fabulous and really great.
Take her BCom class.
Yes. And thank you for letting me live my podcast dreams.
You're so welcome.
Big day for me.
That's awesome.
All right, guys.
Well, thank you again. We really appreciate it. And once we create new subjects for our video podcast, we'll make sure to reach back out to you.
All right. Have a good one, you guys.
We got to do our photo.
Yeah, we got to do our photo too. All right. I'll stop recording now.